Right, it's time for our weekly feature, Going Green, and aptly we are joined tonight by the Minister of Environmental Affairs. Barbara Creecy delivered her first budget speech for the Department of Environment last week. Soon, of course, it will also include Forestry and Fisheries. Creecy has a lot on her plate, mainly pollution. She was appointed in May. Just 2 weeks later, she was hit with a court case about the quality of air. You may recall that last year Greenpeace analysed satellite data and said it proved that eMalahleni in that area in Mpumalanga had the dirtiest air in the world. Coal fire, Eskom, power plant, Sasol, Secunda plant and other mines all contributing to that. Well, the Minister joins us from our studio in Sea Point in Cape Town right now. Thank you for being with us, Minister. And could we start with the quality of air in Mpumalanga? Firstly, are you opposing that court case that has been brought against you and other respondents?
Good evening, Francis, and good evening to all your listeners. I think the department is still considering our stance with regard to the court case, but my personal approach to this matter is that I've already called for a review of the way in which the department has been dealing with air quality on the Mpumalanga Highveld. And I have written to Minister Gordon and Minister Mantashe in this regard, is that we need to get senior role players around a table. We need in particular to be getting decision-making management in those companies where we understand that there are high quantities of emissions. We need to be getting them around the table, and we need to be looking at exactly what we can do so that we improve the quality of air in that area and we move towards a sustainable path that will take us towards minimum emission standards.
From your perspective, how did it get this bad? Because there was an acknowledgement in 2007, so more than 10 years ago, and this priority area, the Highlands Priority Area Air Quality Management Plan was put in place, but it's been nothing but a paper plan for years, hasn't it?
Well, I think that there has been a situation where some of the major emitters have repeatedly requested for exemption from complying with the standards. I would not be appraised of all of the facts that would have led to ministerial decisions in this regard. But I think from where we stand at the moment, clearly we have a situation where we do need to take very drastic steps. We understand that Eskom in particular is working extremely hard in that area to keep the lights on for the country as a whole. But we also understand that it would be necessary for maintenance to be done so that we should be in a position to improve the quality of air. But obviously, with the tight financial situation that Eskom is facing, we've got to sit down and look at what is practical and feasible, but we have to do something.
Yeah. Well, do you have any idea what is practical? So you said you wanted to speak to Minister Gordon, Public Services, and of course, Gwede Mantashe, Minister of Mines. They are the polluters, but like you've said before, we need to keep the lights on. I mean, what do? Would you be willing to shut down an Eskom plant if that is what's needed?
Look, first of all, I've already interfaced with Minister Mantashe, and he has said to me that from his perspective, mining is a dirty operation. It does need to be policed. We understand that one of the problems in that area is the issue of dust. So obviously that's one area that we would need to address. Clearly, I don't think that the country wants to see me interfering with energy security, because what we all understand is that our economy is struggling and we don't need widespread power outages. What we've got to look at, and Minister Gordon is committed to this discussion and he's committed to bringing his power station managers to the table, what we've got to look at is how do we keep the lights on and how do we clean up the quality of the air.
And since there was ostensibly a plan in 2007 and things have just gotten worse, how long will it take, do you think, your department to do something drastic? Because, Minister, we know that people are dying. So Dr. Andrew Gray concluding there had been up to 650 early deaths in 2016. I mean, this is very serious.
Francis, I've told you what I'm going to do, and that is something that we are currently working on.
Can you give us any timelines, is what I'm asking?
I'm working on it now, as we speak. So I'm expecting within the near future that we should be able to pull together the first meeting so that we can take decisions.
Yeah. All right, just before we move away from this, beyond Eskom, I mean, Sasol has also been blamed. There's industrial activity, there's mining activity. Does your department, I mean, do you have the power to shut down an operation or to send those inspectors in that should look at the licenses, I think, issued by municipalities and actually say, no, your operations have to be shut down? I'm trying to gauge how much power you actually have.
There are many steps that you would have to follow before you do something as drastic as shut down a power station or shut down any particular plant. And that is why I'm saying to you, it's important to get the decision makers around a table so that we can put on that table exactly what steps have been taken and exactly what needs to happen from here on.
All right, coming into this position, looking back, you've said that we need to keep the lights on. South Africa obsessing about jobs and poverty. Do you think for years the environment has been deprioritized?
I think that what we have to get is a balance. Obviously, our mandate as a department is to make sure that we have a growth path that is sustainable. And sustainability is all about looking at how you meet your current needs without damaging your long-term security and your long-term future needs. And I think that this is a complex thing to do in a situation where, in Mpumalanga in particular, almost every person who lives in eMalahleni is dependent on those power stations for their livelihood, whether they work there, whether they supply them, whether they are in the downstream or upstream industries associated with them. So it means that when you tackle this issue, you have to do so in a manner that is responsible. And I think it is possible to find a path between the current situation and a situation where we are protecting the current environment, but more importantly, protecting the future environment. And that is what environmental sustainability is all about. It's about finding that middle path between the needs for economic growth and job creation and the sustainable use of our resources. More than 2 million South Africans are dependent on our natural resource base for their livelihood. And what we understand is that that natural resource base is increasingly under pressure from issues such as climate change, issues such as environmental degradation and loss of biodiversity. So what we're saying is that both our economic and our social security depends on us finding a more sustainable growth path, which allows us to develop new industries, it allows us to create new jobs, but what it also allows us to do is to protect our environment for current generations and for future generations.
And like you say, 2 million people dependent directly, that's a huge economic issue. Another big issue for South Africans and the world, I guess, are plastic bags. The pollution we're seeing in the ocean, the concerns it'll come back to our water systems. We at one stage were asking viewers, and many did support a complete ban, not everyone, but given the evidence about plastics, why are we not heading towards a complete ban yet?
Well, I think that across the globe, everybody is starting to recognize that single-use plastics, and we're not just talking about plastic bags here, we're talking about a whole range of containers that we use for our takeaway foods, things that we use in our toiletries. All of these single-use plastics are causing an enormous strain on the environment in general and on the oceans in particular. And what we understand is that if we don't do something about this soon, by 2050, some studies are suggesting there'll be more plastic than fish in the oceans. Now, one of the fundamental things that we've got to tackle is the question of consumer choice and consumer behavior. We've seen a very successful campaign that was run around plastic straws, for example. And what we've seen is a whole range of retail and food and beverage outlets have now said that they are not going to utilize plastic straws. What we want to work on is the whole range of single-use plastics. Many of the big food and beverage manufacturers are already making commitments in the international domain that they will take single-use plastics out of their supply chains over the next 10 years. We have to make sure that those kinds of commitments that are being made are domesticated. In other words, they are brought home to South Africa and we also become beneficiaries of it. But we've also got to do a massive education campaign with consumers so that consumers start asking their favorite stores to receive their takeaway chicken and their takeaway coffee in containers that are not going to last for over 1,000 years. Yeah. Fortunately, the plastics industry itself is very conscious of public pressure and is also looking at ways in which we can dramatically increase the percentage of plastic that is recycled. Plastic bottles have a very good recycling rate. We're looking at something like 65%. But what we're finding is that the recycling rate of other plastics is only in the region of about 10 to 15%, and that obviously needs to change.
Yeah. Minister, very quickly, the plastic bags, I hear what you're saying, that there's a whole range of issues, but those plastic bags in the store are surely a low-lying fruit. And the fact is, as South Africans, we're lazy. I always think I'll get another bag, and then you do it because it's there. Would you consider a complete ban of those plastic bags?
Francis, I think what I would consider is measures that will really have effect. One of the things we know is that previously we introduced a tax on plastic bags, and we also introduced a situation where formal retail stores had to stock bags that were of a particular micron. What we also know is that in the informal economy, you can pick up a plastic bag which is not of the correct micron, and you can also pick it up for free. So I think that what we've got to look at if we want to deal with the problem that our waterways and our oceans are facing is solutions that are going to be sustainable in both the formal and the informal sector of the economy. Because it doesn't help to introduce measures that can be policed in the formal sector of the economy but don't receive any attention in the informal sector, because that informal plastic pollution is still going into our oceans. So that is why I'm saying that public education is incredibly important. Consumer pressure is very important, but more than anything else, buying the industry and the retail sector as a whole, both formal and informal, into whatever solutions we deem are necessary.
All right, thank you very much for your time tonight. Minister of Environmental Affairs, Forestry and Fisheries, Barbara Creecy, and we will follow the progress of that court case. Of course, government, as she's suggesting, in a bit of a bind because many of those Eskom plants are in Mpumalanga, where in some areas, according to some research, there's very dirty, among the dirtiest area in the world.